Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for being here. We are on our, if I'm counting properly, fourth monthly webinar. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, Katie had just mentioned that these are recorded. They are on our website, and I think we're super fancy. We might have a YouTube channel now that houses all of these just for easy finding. And they're also they have some clips from our May 4th event last year. And I think we're going to be pulling out some of our recorded stakeholder events from the Climate Task Force. So I'm not going to talk much longer. This is our first webinar of this calendar year, and I'm going to introduce our moderator today. The other thing I'll say is if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, but I'd like to introduce Jordan Warner. She's an undergraduate student and she with our Student Advisory Board, and she's going to be moderating today's session.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jordan. And I'm going to encourage everyone, all the attendees, to introduce their name in the chat and just put your pronoun or any information you like to say. And I would like to introduce our speakers today. And it is our presenters today. I'm very welcome. It's Wes Coleman and Tom Cunningham, the co-chairs of Procedure and Waste Management of the Climate Action Group. Wes is the Associate Director of Supplier Diversity and Sustainability for Rutgers Procedure Services, and Tom is the Operations and Area Manager for Rutgers Environmental Services. Today's webinar will feature a brief presentation from Wes and Tom on Procedure and Waste Management Climate Action Group, followed by questions and answer session. Please note the webinar is being recorded again, as we mentioned, and will be added to the Office of Climate Action YouTube channel and newsletter for everyone who could not join live today. If you wish not to be recorded, please feel free to stay off camera and share questions and comment using the chat. And I'm going to turn it over to Wes and Tom.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jordan, for that warm introduction. We'll try to keep it somewhat presentation brief. I don't know if you want to add anything, Tom, while I bring the screen up.
Go ahead. I'm Tom Cunningham, and I'm working with Wes, and I'm handling the waste management end of things. And Wes and I are going to try to give you as much information as we can, and we'll look forward to answering as many questions as possible at the end.
Okay. Okay, well, hopefully you can see my screen. Again, this is Procurement and Waste Management Working Group. We want to go through a few introductions, background, which you may already know, the working group scope, some of the initiatives and progress, and the RU history of recycling. Then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. So just membership-wise, again, Tom and I are the co-chairs for the working group, but we represent, the whole group of members, and some of those are actually on the call. I know Carol, Gary, I don't know if you want to, Jack, and say a quick hello.
Hi, I'm Carol Broccoli. I coordinate the New Jersey Recycling Certification Series.
Thanks.
Jack Schrum, Dining Services, Facility Supervisor.
I know you're out there somewhere, Gary.
RBHS.
Thanks. So again, we're one collective team, great membership. At some point in the future, we expect this to probably expand as we get further along, but this is the core group as of today. You may all be aware of the background. We just wanted to step back that this has been in the works for a couple of years now, going back to when President Barchi announced the creation of the Task Force of Carbon Neutrality and Climate Resilience. The team worked hard on putting together a climate action plan that was presented to President Holloway back in June 2021. After review, President Holloway announced Professors Bob Kopp, Kevin, and Angie, who are also on the call. The leadership team of the task force will work with the support of university strategy and lead the development of the implementations of that climate action plan and form really the formal Office of Climate Action. So these are typically the groups, the climate action group. So you can see there's a very, 6 different buckets of groups. We're procurement and waste management. All of these groups are comprised of faculty and staff to lead the implementation plans in the different areas. There could be some cross-cutting, like for dining and services and food. We deal, it's part of our group to work more on the food waste side of things. So again, as you're looking through these different buckets, there will be some cross-cutting between these various buckets. So again, just want to rephrase the goals of our climate action goals for Rutgers. So again, carbon neutral by 2040, work across campus for comprehensive plans for just and equitable climate adaptation, and just to build a culture of sustainability throughout, all of Rutgers. So this gets more into what the objective for our particular working group is. So that's develop a data collection methodology system for scope 3 emissions reporting. So that's 1, and 2 is to really reduce the indirect scope 3 emissions associated with non-food supply chain procurement and waste by 30% by 2030. So again, we're just more so focused on the indirect emissions in scope 3. Just benchmarking scope 1 and scope 2. A lot of organizations, universities focus more on scope 1 and scope 2, but there's a lot in that scope 3 category that we at Rutgers are committed to really capture those emissions in that scope. So again, scope 1 is more of those direct emissions. Scope 2 is kind of indirect from purchase electricity, heating and cooling, and then scope 3 is kind of all other indirect emissions such as leased assets, purchasing goods and services, and so forth. And then, as we get into developing a data collection system, we reviewed the greenhouse gas protocol. So we want to use that methodology to define, our scope 3 emissions. So it provides a framework for reporting emissions and for the university. So we feel good about the greenhouse gas protocol. So we want to do the next step is really to define what the scope 3 categories what Rutgers definition will be for scope 3 categories. As you can see in the bottom, there's about 15 categories according to the greenhouse gas protocol. So now we're just looking to define, having discussions around what 15, makes sense for Rutgers. And just the first thought is to take a phased approach to focus on where we have data available, such as business travel, employee commuting, and then get into other buckets as we continue to build out, have more reliable data in other areas such as purchase goods and services and so forth. So that's some of the key activities is, now that we have a methodology we want to go with, kind of define those, the RU definition of scope 3. So we're going to do some data gathering, review existing policies, procedures, and then we expect there to be some research projects going on as it comes in the future. Okay. So another objective was to reduce scope 3 emissions. So there were some potential solutions identified. So policy reduction, reuse policy, reduce toxic chemicals, contract with suppliers that offer end of life recycle. So a lot of this is going to be dealing with our suppliers, strategic suppliers, and making sure that we have relationships where they can support us in our efforts. And to create an awareness campaign for sustainability, which goes back to the goal of building a culture of sustainability throughout Rutgers.
Mhm.
And just wanted to note some of the initiatives that are currently in flight throughout the university activities. So, University Surplus, they now have govdeals.com, whether it's a marketplace where they have the sale of assets. SEBS has been working on a pilot orientation video for incoming Rutgers students. We have one of our board members closely tied to Office of Research that has been working on the Reaply Asset Manager system for sharing of equipment across university. So those are just some of the things, and a few more are approved RFP for e-waste that's been vetted by environmental health, audit services, purchasing, continuously work with our strategic suppliers again on recycling take-back programs. We have Office Depot, RICO, that we have ink and toner cartridge programs. I think Office Depot also have a K-Cup recycling program. Then we also deal with Beckman Coulter for another take-back program. So that's one thing we're looking to do to gain more foot is to incorporate environmental requirements to our competitive bidding process. work with strategic suppliers that have catalogs in our procurement system to further promote green offerings within their catalog. And then again, just to mention that Rutgers recently conducted a disparity study. So we look to, based on those recommendations, further support, our university supply diversity program build and more buy local initiatives. So just want to highlight some of those things. Okay, any questions on what we've covered so far? And I see Dr. Lyons and Magda are on the call as well. So they were very critical in the disparity study efforts as well. So I'll kick it to you, Tom, to talk
Okay.
more about the recycling.
Now, I don't seem to have the ability to change the slides, so you're gonna have to do that for me.
I'll drive for you, no problem.
Okay, so and I'll just do the commentary. Yeah. All right. So we're gonna go into the history of Rutgers recycling. It goes way back in 1972. Rutgers had a voluntary program that was operated by a faculty member and a couple of faculty members and a couple of staff members and volunteer students. Started in the Kilmer Barracks, and it was designated as a recycling site. And that was the birth of a nationally recognized recycling program that also expanded. Eventually, they had sites over on the Cook campus and over at the end of Comstock Street, where the Coleman residence halls used to be. And then it grew in 1980 in Highland Park and Edison and Piscataway now contributed to plastics and glass collections. Efforts led to modern developments of wood substitutes that were developed through the School of Engineering. In 1987, we established a mandatory recycling program, the state did, and programs extended to students, faculty, and staff and visitors. So as a result of the state establishing a mandatory recycling program, the university established one too. And a lot of the components of that original program are still in place today. In 2000, the program grew to include food organics, mixed paper, cardboard, cans, tires, concrete, appliances, oil, lighting, carpeting, and more, even soil. I mean, so we were recycling just about everything that could be processed for recycling and capturing that. And that was a lot of weight that was now no longer going to the landfill. In 2001, Rutgers began to claim Recyclemania awards. The Recyclemania is a national program with mostly colleges and universities where they all compete for recycling awards for a number of things: the most per capita, the most weight in general, the most food composted, etc. And later on, I can even extend and give people the website address for that. But we're EPA Partner of the Year award. We had several APA awards, and APA is the American Association of Physical Plant Administrators, which Rutgers is a member. We expanded adding more commodities. And we also instituted green cleaning, a green cleaning program, which has expanded each year. Single stream recycling, which meant that instead of recycling all of your individual waste streams separately, we took plastic, glass, aluminum, and paper and cardboard and put that all together into one stream where it's taken to a processing facility and separated there, and the individual commodities are sold. And we also been increasing more sustainability programs everywhere we can find them. Okay, go next, Les. Since 2015, Rutgers has recycled a total of 114,321 tons of material. That's 66% of our solid waste over that same period of time. Okay.
Mhm.
All right, so just to elaborate a little more on the recycling, all right? Our recycling program, I'm gonna admit, it is not perfect. It's continuing to be a work in progress, and it can't be successful without the cooperation of all the users in the Rutgers community at large to help us to make the program a success. And where it's part of this committee's efforts, and several other committees that we're working with, we're trying to work towards having better education programs and better outreach programs to get more students, faculty, and staff involved in the recycling and sustainability process to make it more successful and to make it continue to be successful from year to year.
Mhm. Yep. And I agree, Tom. And just to mention, we have, held a couple events. One as late as May 4th, there was an event where we had a couple of polling questions where we received feedback on what we can do for our particular working group. So we did take that feedback and we'll incorporate that into our plans. Some of which the questions, I believe, Jordan, you may address here shortly. So did you want to get into the feedback? We can get into feedback from the peer group. So while we do have students on the line, faculty and staff, we do want to pose a few different questions to get some feedback so that our particular working group can take that back and make sure we incorporate.
Yeah, I'll just take it from here and we're gonna do exactly what you said. We're gonna move to the Q&A section, and thank you for the great presentation. We have some pre-written questions, but
Mhm.
of course we would love to start from the audience. So if you guys have any questions, comments, or anything, please put it in the chat or raise your hand. So David, I see your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I'm David Hughes from Anthropology. I have a question and a comment about recycling. I'm sort of surprised to see that this is still on the table, because we know that if 114,000 tons are put in a bin, that means that we consumed 114,000 tons of petrochemicals and all the energy that went into making them into the bottles. And we also know, because plastics recycling has been revealed to be quite a myth since the market has fallen apart. You can't make plastic bottles out of plastic bottles by and large. It's not really being recycled, it's being consumed. And so 9 universities across the country have recognized this, and they've banned the sale of plastic bottles on campus. University of Vermont did this 10 years ago. So my question, Tom, and to the committee is, why can't we do that? Just discontinue whenever the contract with Pepsi or whoever it is runs out, stop selling plastic bottles on campus. We already have water bottle filling stations. We have stores on campus which sell metal water bottles. It doesn't cost anything to ban plastic bottles. It's an easy step to take. It would be an accomplishment, the first accomplishment of the Office of Climate Action. What's stopping us all from doing it?
Well, part of this initiative here with this committee, one of the things we're looking at is we're going to be looking at ways to not just recycle, but to actually reduce that waste by not having that problem in the first place, which you spoke to. So if we didn't have plastic in the first one, we reduced dramatically the amount of plastic on campus through dealing with vendors that would provide more recyclable packaging, or at least packaging that could be processed as recycling in a better way and be reused down the road, then that would be a win-win situation for us. Does that answer your question a little? And as far as the recycling, you're right. Plastics represents less than 10% of what we recycle, right? And when you look at those 114, the high tonnage that I gave you, right? A lot of that is other materials that get included in that is construction waste, soil, concrete. So there's a lot of things in there, and hold in mind, soil and concrete weigh a lot. All right, so a lot of that adds that weight, increases that weight. Does that help?
Well, yes, but it would help quite a bit more if you would say, and you don't have to say it today, but you could say it at some point, that say by January 1st of 2024, no plastic bottles will be sold on campus.
Mhm.
That's what the University of Vermont did 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And that's an easy thing to do. And you don't have to study a lot. You can just tell all the vendors, we are going to stop buying everything from you that is packaged in plastic when it comes to drinks. I'm talking about bottles, not just
Mhm.
water, all bottles.
Mhm.
Now, Wes can speak to that as well, because part of what we're looking at is procurement policies as well. Is like, what are we buying? What suppliers are we dealing with? How are they supplying us the products? I mean, we even had a discussion where we talked about yogurt. Yogurt containers are currently not recyclable. So, but we can deal with either get the suppliers that are providing that yogurt to provide that yogurt in a more recyclable container, or get a different supplier that is going to provide that container that's going to be recyclable. So yes, we are looking at all of that, and not just plastic. And we're talking about everything across the board that we're going to be have. The whole idea is to reduce scope 3 emissions, and to reduce those emissions, we have to look at a lot of the packaging and look at the materials that we are currently recycling, and should we look at another way to deal with that? And yes, one of those ways is, but I'm not the person who could sit there and say, okay, well, the university has announced we're not going to do that anymore. There's going to be people far higher than me that are going to make that decision. Wes and I are merely in a position, along with our committee, to make recommendations about what the university should do going forward.
Mhm.
We're going to look to do that. If you would like to join our committee to help with that effort, we would welcome your involvement.
Mhm. Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, that I appreciate that that recommendation, Dave Hughes. So part of this is really to take this back and figure out the why and how we can take steps forward, the different, opportunities, challenges within each, and put together a package to see what, how we can move, something similar to that forward.
Okay, thank you everyone, and thank you David, and thank you Tom, and thank you Wes for your
Mhm.
answers. We're going to move on to some other students. I see some raised hand. I saw Victor had a hand raised, and feel free to put any more questions in the chat.
I was gonna say C June had their hand raised first.
Oh, okay. See June.
Oh, hi. My name is Zijun. I was actually on the original working group 4 back in, I think it was 2019, 2020-ish.
Mhm.
But I was going to speak about the recycling part as well, was that I know there's a lot of news about stuff not getting recycled and stuff. And I think at one point they said it was 6% of the plastics were getting recycled. Now, depending on how they view that, is that a lot of it is the 6% was mainly pertaining to those 3 through 7 plastics, not the clear water bottles, milk jugs, or detergent jugs. Because in that 3 through 7 category, it's mostly number 5s, which is polypropylene, which most of the yogurt containers are made of. That's probably the most recyclable commodity. And then I think with bottles, plastic water bottles at least, I think that rate was around 25 to anywhere between 20 to 30%. And a lot of that wasn't captured was either it was in a dark, or if it was encased in a plastic bag, chances are it could have just moved through the facility. That bag might have not been open and it just ended up in a landfill. The other issue is the water, because sometimes people don't finish their drinks, and if there's liquid still left in it, the machines, they use air jets that blow the bottles into a separate bunker. Those machines won't be able to pick up bottles with liquid in it, and sometimes it's contaminated with other food items. But yeah, and then when they look at large scale percentages, a lot of it, there is a lot of margin of error too, because with a plastic bottle, they lose about 30 to 40% weight when they finish processing it into pellets, because of the labels and caps and any liquids that are left in it. But it depends on how you see it. But yes, I actually did know that Coca-Cola, they were testing out a way to I think it's called their freestyle system, where you just pay for, you can use a reusable bottle, and then you just pay, like, I don't know, a certain amount for like a certain drink, and it just dispenses it almost like a refill station pretty much. So yeah.
But I want to comment on, you made a comment about saying most yogurt containers are recyclable. We're finding that's not the case. It's the opposite. They're not recyclable. And so then this is us working with our recycling vendor and also Colgate Paper and Recycling, which processes most of our recycling, and Bayshore, that the current, most of the yogurt that's being sold, it's in non-recyclable plastic. So that information may have changed. I'll be happy to talk to you offline about it. I could show you the data.
Yeah.
But
I mean, a lot of them are made of
a lot of work
yeah.
to do. Pardon me?
Yeah. I know there are some yogurt containers that are made of PS plastic, which those are not recyclable, but the PP ones are sometimes, depending on how they sort it, they may be able to recycle it. But the other issue is sometimes that foil lid on there, if it's not removed completely, it's hard for them to chip it down to.
And the same thing you mentioned with bottles, the tops are not recyclable, while the bottles are, and yes, there is a lot of extensive processing, which you end up losing some weight in that process.
Yeah.
But again, even before you get to that, there's still a lot of plastics that aren't even making it into the recycling stream.
Yeah.
And you joined me, I was there with you when we were doing waste audits, and we saw that a lot of it wasn't even making it into the right container. So part of it is getting it into the right containers in the first place, and then looking at better ways to process that, and even better, looking at better ways to deal with that stream to have it supplied to us in a more recyclable container. And this way, the end of life would end up reducing our carbon footprint instead of increasing it.
I'm not sure if this would be within, it's probably more on the facilities end, but it was also that I think it was one of my observations. I don't think, when we went out to visit the sites, I don't think initially we saw that as an issue, but on a lot of the buildings, the garbage can is smaller than the recycling bin, which could be a problem, because I think during the audits we found that it was more garbage than recycling. So it was, if it overfills, then it would overfill into the other bin, and that would just contaminate stuff. But yeah.
And that's one of the things that we've been discussing on this committee, and also on another committee I'm on with Dr. Lyons, that we want to recommend to the leadership that the little buddies that go on with the containers, that's a failed program, and we want to discontinue that and go to a 2-container system, which will make it easier for people to put the right items into the right container, and encourage them to do so as well.
Yeah, and the other thing was, now this I did see it sporadically, was that sometimes the custodians weren't given a separate labeled bin for recyclables, or like, I know back at my high school, they used to get 2 locked bins. One was blue, one was gray. So that way they would have, separate bins to, be able to dump the material in at the same time. And that was also a cross-contamination issue when I think it was at one of the residence halls. I think they were they were putting the bags of recyclables down the trash chute, and since the bags, I mean, they weren't really going to separate after it went into down the chute anyway. So it was just the process of making sure that everyone has, like, including anyone who does facilities or janitorial services, has the right tools to be able to keep these materials separate until they make it into the dumpster or compactor.
And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we're going to be doing a large series of waste audits using a new matrix, which Dave DeHart had developed prior to his retirement. And it worked very well. They did a pilot with that late last year. So we're going to expand on that. And a lot of that is being done in residence halls. We realize there There's a lot of education that needs to be done there with staff as well as the students and the faculty that take care of them as well. So
Mhm.
we have a lot of work to do, and you were right there with us, so you know that to be true. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
So, but we are going to be doing all of that because now, remember, we were frustrated before because people weren't listening to us. Now we have the support of the president's office. So this is a university-wide initiative, to address climate action. All right. So this is part of that. So now we're going to have much more support from the highest levels of the university to be able to get some initiative on this.
Thanks. Actually,
Oh,
one
I don't,
last
I don't,
thing.
no, no, I don't want to interrupt. I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to speak.
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
So
sure.
Victor's had his hand up for quite
Yeah.
some time.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I'll let Victor speak.
Thank you, Angie.
Hi, good afternoon. So as we discuss these topics, I would like to actually give some ideas that I've been noticing as due to my membership in various environmental organizations here on campus, and to follow that, I have a question. I do want to mention that when it comes to recycling, we have to keep in mind that recycling is actually the least effective of the three R's. First is reducing, because when you reduce, you don't actually waste anything; you just use less of a product. Then reusing, and then recycling. So that must always be kept in mind when developing plans such as these. With regards to the comment that was mentioned earlier on the yogurt being made with more recyclable materials, I want to point out that similar initiatives can be done with other brands. I've heard that if let's say you're doing a cleanup on campus, and I say this because I'm part of an organization that has a recycling campaign that does biweekly cleanups around campus, and something to keep in mind is that if you're doing a cleanup and you find several items of one brand, you can actually take note of this and notify whatever brand this is, that a large amount of their products were found like just thrown in a certain place without being properly disposed of or recycled. And this can actually encourage brands to make changes to how they make their products, so they're made in more reusable and sustainable ways. A topic that I do want to ask about is I feel like there's a topic that needs more discussion, is accessibility and ability to recycle. And by this I mean, in for example, in Middlesex County, you cannot correct me if I'm wrong, you cannot recycle a box of pizza in Middlesex County, but in New York City, that is possible to be done if it is sanitized and cleaned properly. And I want to know if this office has any plans on addressing that topic. And by that I mean by accessibility and ability, I mean the ability of having a product that is not recyclable in one place and has no other choice to be disposed in this particular location, like the ability to have it sent to a location where it can be recycled and therefore it does not end up in a landfill, contributing to the effects of climate change.
It's interesting you mentioned that with the pizza boxes. Yes, that is true. In the state of New Jersey, if items are food contaminated, where we cannot include that in the recycling stream, and the recycling processors cannot run that through their equipment. However, something like a pizza box, which is cardboard, if it is food contaminated, or any packaging that is food contaminated that is cardboard or paper, that could be added to a compost. And we have composting vendors on campus which remove food waste and other compostable materials from the student centers and from the sports concessions. We've been doing that for the last couple of years, and we're expanding on that as we speak. So that is helping. But again, looking at better ways to make that product more sustainable for us is the way that we need to go. And you talked about the 3 R's. So, so recycling is not the only method that we look at. We want to look at trying to look at other ways to do what we've been doing before, so we're not going to have so much waste in the first place.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to Michael's question in the chat. They wrote, so Rutgers is going to move to install a number of solar projects now, and in a number of years, the first of which was installed around 2008, they have a 25-year life. So now is a time to think about recycling the panels on close to the loop on clean energy, to close the loop on clean energy. One way to do that is a somewhat easier right provision in the solar panel bids to require solar panels to be used or recycled or potentially recycle products, or have the installed panel supplier take back the panels. And any thought on solar panel recycling? And same questions about EV batteries.
Well, EV batteries are anything that we have there. As a matter of fact, all batteries, all auto batteries, dry cell batteries, EV batteries, lithium batteries, every battery that we have here, we can recycle through a certified and third-party certified vendor that was vetted by REHS, and we continue to recycle thousands of pounds of batteries every year, including EV batteries. The EV batteries that run those little carts, the little scooters that are around campus, that's an outside vendor that basically they have a recycling program that they deal with. Their shop is in North Brunswick, and they're governed by the rules of North Brunswick, and they hand in all their information every year to North Brunswick to ensure that they're doing so. As far as solar panels, is Mike on the line here? Wes?
No, I don't believe Mike is.
So,
Yeah.
So solar panels, I do know that they are, that the whole process of the use of solar panels and the purchasing of solar panels and the specifications that are going out for the purchase of those is a situation that's evolving, and that's being run by several other people in the utilities. And if you want, if somebody could give me the person who asked that question, if I can get the person's email, I can make sure somebody can get them a better answer to that question.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And if you want to put your email in the chat, Michael, please feel free to do so.
Mhm.
Andrew has a question in the chat. Any thoughts on PFOA/PFAS in recyclables?
Could they elaborate on that?
That's what's in the chat, but I'm assuming they mean in the recycling process or something along those lines, or the use of them. But
Yeah, Andrew, feel free to elaborate more too. I know it sounds like talking about like PFAS, which were like recently put on the Superfund site list too as a chemical of concern. And as far as I know, they're in a bunch of plastics, so I don't know if that becomes a problem for folks who are handling the recycling while it's being like melted down or anything for plastic recycling.
Good point, Katie. But until then, I'm gonna move on to, I see another question.
And I do want to get that person an answer. So if they can, again, the email, and I will make sure to get them a response. I just need a little more information. That's all.
I see another question in the chat. This is a small question, but is it possible to provide reusable bottles during orientation for incoming students, and also a brief presentation during orientation to encourage incoming students to use them and to build confidence in water? But I entered late, so this might have been answered already. Well, I personally know at Rutgers Newark at orientation, when I was a freshman, I got a free water bottle. I still have it. but I'm going to hand it over to Tom or Wes.
And yes, that is
Yeah.
definitely possible.
Yeah.
And that is something that we could take as that Wes and I could use to make suggestions that where at large campus operations and events where they're giving out one-use bottles that are then going to they use them once and then they throw them wherever, encouraging the use of reusable bottles and giving them water stations so they can refill those bottles. And actually, you're seeing more and more refillable bottle stations popping up all over all the campuses. And that's going to keep increasing as time goes on. But if we can encourage the people that are giving out these bottles with their events to try to give out reusable bottles with a means to refill those bottles, not only would they use those bottles for that event, they may continue to use those bottles afterwards. That's less bottles that end up in the landfill or end up having to have us recycle.
Yeah, I believe Joe Charette was on the call. I know Jack is probably too, but they give those. I know they've made a commitment to do those to incoming students, and part of the education is something that we're working on now, whether it's building the orientation for incoming students and so forth. So great suggestions.
Yeah, and Dining Services has excellent programs. Definitely. Yeah.
I just want to really quickly address the second half of Phaedra's question, because I know that Phaedra is coming from the Newark campus, and this idea of building confidence in the water because there were water quality issues. That is something we're really aware of. There's a group of people, the Newark Climate Action Group is taking this on as a project to ban bottled water on their campus. And one of the things that they're dealing with is this question of confidence in the safety of the water. So this idea that bottled water is safer because there was an issue with lead. So I just want to acknowledge that very quickly, and that it is a particular issue in Newark, and it is on the radar of the Climate Action Group there, and we are working with that.
Thank you, Angie. I appreciate that point, because personally, I'm a Rutgers Newark student. I've seen issues with water, especially in my friend's dorm. I've seen water come out brown for like multiple days. And so I'm happy that it's on your guys' radar. But I see another part of your question is discussing can departments offer any extra water bottles at events they have? I actually have a question about that too, in the sense of I've gone to both campuses' gyms, and on the Bush campus gym, I've seen you could purchase plastic water bottles and plastic like protein shakes. Would it be possible or for this action group to try to get, when they're selling, to sell reusable waters? Because I know there's a water bottle refill station right next to the gym. And it's
Yes. There's multiple refillable stations in each recreation center on all campuses. So and in the student centers as well. So yes, that's definitely something we can work with those departments to encourage them to use more sustainable methods, like have reusable bottles, especially if they have a means to fill them that are right next to where they're selling the one-time use bottles.
Yeah. I mean, that's the beneficial part of having this webinar, is for us to hear, areas of which we can go back and, put some plans around something that's, the voice of the community. So it's great.
I appreciate that.
Fully realize we have a lot of work in front of us. Sorry, go ahead.
So you guys can continue to put questions or raise your hand, but I know the Office of Climate Action student group, which I'm a part of, we prepped some questions our last meeting. So I'm going to move to there if I don't see anything else right now. And so, okay. Is there a plan for reducing hospital waste, particularly related to the operating room, where a majority of the hospital waste occurs? Is it possible to form a task force to address operating room waste?
I'm sure that's, you can elaborate, but I'm sure that's something we can address. I know we'll probably engage environmental health as part of that conversation to do that.
We've been working with, because the medical and hazardous waste is managed as a separate stream, and it's managed by, there's actually a designated group of people within REHS that manage that process, and they use a number of vendors that on campus, and some of that is recycled, some of it is not, but all of that is processed as a separate stream, which my department does not control. And we're looking to get someone from REHS on our committee, so that part of the process could be addressed as well. So Wes and I agreed early, matter of fact, all of us agreed early on that that's something that does need to be addressed.
Hey, Tom, this is Kevin Lyons. I think that and Angie, the RBHS climate working group, in combination with Tom's as well as REHS, this might be something that they put on their radar as well, because obviously all the medical and dental schools are under RBHS, and they do have their own climate action group. So I think this might be a well-coordinated part. It's a big one, but I think it's something that they could all hopefully take the lead on as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also looking at like a lot of lab glass I can see from what my own staff is dealing with is not being processed. What they do is they just seal it up in a cardboard box to get thrown in the trash. This is what REHS is telling us to do. But then I'm finding that there are a number of avenues to send that into a recycling stream and there are vendors that will process it, which is that a regular waste management vendor will not, because they don't have a means to do so. But there are other vendors to do that. So we would like to explore those avenues, widen them as much as possible, because we could pick up a lot of tonnage that way. And we always use terms of tonnage. We want to, the more weight we're recycling, it's the less weight that's going to the landfill. So that's when we're dealing with recycling. And again, looking at other ways where some of that glass may not have to be thrown out, to be more reused by other departments.
Okay. Whoever, you can raise your hand. I didn't see who just spoke, but thank you for your responses. And thank you, Kevin, for adding too.
And thank you, Kevin.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Who was about to speak? You could raise your hand and I'll allow you, or we can move on to another question prepared. Yes.
Oh, yeah, I was actually going to make a comment, not a question, but the issue with the lab glass is they have a higher melting point than the standard glass. So, the traditional vendor, they might turn it into regular glass bottles or containers, but with the lab glass, I have to look into it, but to my knowledge, they can use it as a concrete additive or a sand mix-in on some applications, but yeah, that's just a comment.
Use it for road construction or building construction. There's a number of different uses that they could be ground up. Even grinding it back down and reconstituting it later on as another product. So there's a number of things that can be done there, as opposed to just throwing it out.
Thank you. That was interesting, actually. And I'm going to move on to another question prepared, because I don't see any questions or hand raised. But how will you address waste management and procedure together, lifestyle analysis and circular supply chain? And what are the benefits to including both in one climate action group?
Wes, I'm going to let you pick up on that.
Oh, I would also just add, I think the life cycle analysis and circular supply chains were like examples of like possible ways.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
I mean, well, from my perspective, this is a university-wide initiative. So there's a lot of it is behavior change, especially just talking from a purchasing standpoint. It's very decentralized purchasing. So it's important for us to have university-wide buy-in. So as we're implementing policies, now that we have commitment from the top level, this is going to have to be driven down through policies and other viewpoints. So we have to engage the voice of community and actually look at policy and how to enforce that throughout the university. So,
and also to elaborate from the waste management side, we're managing the waste once it's created as waste. And so the real goal here is to try to reduce that waste as much as possible. So in other words, look at other avenues for end of life for all of those products or the packaging of those products to go to a more sustainable use, as opposed to going to be processed as recycling, which technically sustainable, but it would be more sustainable if they would reuse it some other way or replace it with something that is more reusable and something you don't just throw out after
Mhm.
use. And,
Yeah.
and there's a lot. I'm literally, Wes and I have been looking at, there's a lot to go through. This is going to take some time, but that doesn't mean
Mhm.
we can't make progress if we all work together to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, and on the front end is really promote and reduce, which requires some education, life cycle analysis of products. You know, a lot of people look at costs up front, but with further research, you know, we'll try to better educate, you know, the end user purchasing community on, you know, how that breaks down over time.
Also, hold in mind, one of our primary goals of this group is measuring scope 3 emissions from these things. So that is measuring the life cycle of all of these commodities and looking at other ways to manage it better. So we reduce the impact on the carbon footprint of the university.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to Gloria's question and then Angie. I saw Gloria, then Angie. Is there anything in place university-wide for recycling styrofoam coolers which accumulate in labs?
Currently, there isn't, but we are actually within facilities. We recognize there is a major need for that. There was a vendor that we were bringing everything to. That vendor had gotten out of the business. And interestingly enough, not enough other people are in the business of doing that. So we're looking at a number of avenues, another vendor or a series of vendors to be able to process those recyclables for us, or actually going out and buying the equipment where we will heat the polystyrene back down into bricks and then sell that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. I really
Yeah.
like that insight.
And that's a goal this year. We are looking to have that online. So by the end of this fiscal year, we're probably going to be sending news out saying this is a new initiative for the university. So we are definitely embarking on that.
Mhm.
That's great. Thank you.
I'm gonna go to Angie's question and then we have a wrap-up question. All right.
I don't really have a question. I'm responding to the question that was before that one about having procurement and waste management together, just sort of giving a little bit of history and talking about this. When we were thinking about these groups as we were setting them up, it was really Wes's area is procurement. So this is everything that we bring into the university, and Tom's area is really waste management. So everything that's leaving the university. And the idea is, how can we change the way we bring things into the university so that we're sending less stuff out? And so it's really that life cycle. It's not just life cycle in terms of emissions, but it's in terms of actual use. Is there a way that we can purchase differently so that we're wasting differently? And so that, I mean, it seems a little bit odd perhaps to have these two people in the same, be co-chairs of the same group. That was really the thinking. Can we think holistically about the things that we're doing on campus or bringing onto campus? And the other thing I'll say really quickly is that Wes and Tom and I had a meeting recently where we were really just sort of saying, how do we start eating this like 10,000-pound elephant, and really looking at three kind of basic buckets of things that we could be doing. One is initiating behavior change, which you've heard both of them talk a lot about. So Wes is dealing with purchasers distributed throughout the university, and Tom is dealing with every single person throwing things away in different places. And so these are really distributed. So behavior change is a really big one. The other one is policy, writing new policy. So this was the very first question that was asked about how can we write new policy? But then this is the third thing. Policy is only good as it is followed. And so the third one is, how do we make sure that the existing policies are being adhered to? And so that's not necessarily a thing that we have. We don't have policy police running around Rutgers. So we could write all the policies in the world, but if no one's following them, they're not really doing any good. And so it's not just creation of policy, it's creation of policies that we know, one, are adherable, like we can get people to adhere to them, and then one that we can like measure that they are being adhered to. And so those are the three big buckets, knowing that these two individuals in the group that they work with are trying to wrangle this really huge thing around the university. And so I hope that sort of helps frame, they talked about a lot of very specific things, but I hope that helps frame the sort of overall universe of what they're trying to do, and also then measure all of that. So I just want to sort of frame that a little bit as to why these two very seemingly different people are co-chairing the same group.
Thank you, Angie. I really thought that was very holistic approach. I like that idea. And thank you for everyone's great questions. We're reaching towards the end of the hour. We have exactly 5 more minutes left. To wrap it up, I would like to ask one last question. How can the Rutgers community support the work of the Procedure and Waste Management Climate Action Group.
I mean, easily, well, I can share my email address. I don't, we first of all appreciate everybody's time to, sit through your lunch hour, to actually, come attend this event and give us your ideas. So if you have ideas, please let us know. There'll be an abundance of opportunities as we move forward. We're just really starting off. So we appreciate your time, effort, input, with ideas, if and your time, if you're willing to commit as well, as we look to expand our membership base.
And share my email as well, because I welcome continued feedback, because I'm never one who has ever claimed to have all the answers. And even when I go into webinars like this, I find out there's a lot of people who have other answers that I may not have even considered. This is educational for all of us all around. And I'd like to continue that process and also encourage people who Wes and I need help. So if there are more people who would like to get involved with the committee, please get in touch with us. We'll let you know when our next meeting is, and we will get involved. And we'll get you involved, and we will work towards this. And like Angie said, this is a large job that we have in front of us to wrangle a lot of different moving parts. But if we do it all together as a team, I think we can succeed and make headway with this and make an impact that we can all be proud of.
Exactly. And really to have those champions throughout campus, that's what we need. Again, to enforce policy or any type of change is really to have champions in the community to help us drive this home.
I would like to thank our speakers. I really liked your points about implementation and just everyone being able to make an impact. And I still see some people still interested, so please feel free to email them. They said they're very ready to hear opinions and just really willing to join the group. And thank you, Tom and Wes, and for taking the time to share more about their work on the procedure waste management. And thank you all for joining us today. And all of your questions were very insightful. And if you're interested in learning more about the climate action at Rutgers, we encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on social media, and we're going to have another webinar next month on dining and food services in New Brunswick. We'll share additional information soon. And so Katie's going to drop a link and to stay connected. And again, if you have continued concerns or questions, Tom and Wes were very open for comments and questions to email them. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Have a
Thank
good
you
one.
Thanks,
all.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Great presentation, great moderating.
Thanks. Yep. Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Katie.
Have a great one.